My name is Dr. Carol Rittner. I'm Distinguished Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies Emerita and the Dr. Marsha Raticoff Grossman Professor of Holocaust Studies Emerita at Stockton University in New Jersey. Today, I would like to talk with you about rescuers during the Holocaust. And I want to begin by telling you about an ancient Jewish tradition. It is the tradition of the Lamed Vav, one that has remained even down to our own time. According to this tradition, the world rests on the shoulders of 36 just men. They are known as the Lamed Vav, the hidden righteous ones. They are indistinguishable from simple mortals. Often they are unaware of their station, their position. But, so the tradition goes, if just one of them were missing, humanity would suffocate with a single cry. According to the Talmud, that is according to Jewish civil and ceremonial law and legend, in each generation, the Lamed Vav are there to support the world and to help the Jewish people when they are endangered. During the Holocaust, because evil threatened to overwhelm the Jewish people, the Lamed Vav needed the help of non-Jews. Today, I want to speak about some of those non-Jews who helped the Lamed Vav during the Holocaust. But first, I want you to ask yourself this question. If Anne Frank had been my neighbor in Amsterdam during World War II and the Holocaust, would I have helped her? As you think about that question, consider these facts. The Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic extermination of 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their collaborators. It was a central act of the German Nazi state during the Second World War. The Holocaust was a vast undertaking by the Nazis and their collaborators. Look for a moment at these two maps. One is a map of Europe in 1938. You can see the individual countries. The second map shows the extent of the German occupation of Europe during World War II. The Holocaust itself lasted from the beginning of World War II in 1939 until Germany surrendered in May 1945. The Holocaust's immediate roots go back to 1933 and Adolf Hitler and the Nazis' ascent to power in Germany. But as the great German Jewish rabbi and scholar Abraham Joshua Heschel once said, the Holocaust did not begin with Hitler and the Nazis. It did not even begin with guns and gas. It began with words. Hateful words about Jews and Judaism. And those hateful words go back hundreds and hundreds of years, nearly 2 millennia. For too many people in Europe, the Jews were a despised people, pushed to the margins of society. And the hateful words many people used to speak about Jews and Judaism, the hateful images used to describe them, helped to prepare too many non-Jews, Christians, Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox Christians, psychologically, emotionally, politically, to be receptive to Hitler and the Nazis' so-called final solution of the Jewish question. In other words, it helped to anesthetize people. It helped to desensitize them. It helped them to become bystanders to what was happening to their Jewish friends, neighbors, and colleagues. About the Holocaust, the great European murder of 6 million Jews and the murderers themselves, there's little left to say. We know how it was done. We know who did it. We know who helped. We know where it was done and when and why. We know about the murder and the murderers. These were the men and women from Nazi Germany and beyond. That is, those people in every Nazi German occupied country in Europe during World War II who willingly harassed, hunted, persecuted, pummeled, plundered, tortured, and murdered Jews, millions of Jews. Keep in mind that the Nazis lacked the power to sustain the final solution, the Holocaust, without the cooperation of millions of non-Jews who were under their domination. They needed people who would not interfere with their dirty, rotten killing business, and they found them, millions of them, standing on street corners, peeking out from behind window shades, lurking in dark alleys. Most were quiet citizens who wanted nothing more than to get on with their private lives. The bystander was safe enough if compliant enough. They watched as their neighbors were taken, the doctors and lawyers, the merchants and grocers, the teachers and students, the mothers, the fathers, the children, all of them. They watched, or they averted their eyes, as the Germans and their collaborators rounded up and deported all sorts of Jews, pious Jews, poor Jews, rich Jews, secular Jews, Universalist Jews, baptized Jews, Jews who were shopkeepers or doctors or carpenters or professors, Jewish men and women, Jewish infants and children. All of them were hunted down, destroyed, murdered. The bystanders were on the sidelines, fearful, unobtrusive, compliant. Perhaps we feel the pale warmth of recognition, call it self-recognition, because they, the bystanders, are the ones most of us can readily identify with, because a bystander is like you and me, the ordinary human article. We know what we think about the victims, and we know what we think about the murderers and the murderers. We are not at a loss about how we regard them. But what we don't know is how to regard those non-Jews who tried to help Jews during World War II and the Holocaust. What do we think about them? How do we regard them? What can we say about them? Most people, you know, are decent enough for ordinary purposes. Most people cannot be blamed for not being heroes. A hero, like a murderer, is an exception. No one ought to be expected to become a hero. In Nazi Germany in the 1930s and later in Nazi German occupied Europe in the 1940s during the war and during the Holocaust, bystanders set the norm for action because there were so many of them. Still, we must not forget that there were others, ordinary folks as well, who refused to stand by as their neighbors were being hauled off to the killing sites. They were willing to see, to judge, to decide to act. I don't know how many of you have seen Schindler's List. I'm sure you can find it on Netflix or Infinity on Demand. But Oskar Schindler was one of those people who was willing to see, to judge, and who decided to act to try to save people's lives. He was no saint by any means, but he was a good man. What you have to know is that there were others in Nazi-occupied Europe who also tried to help people. Not enough, obviously, or more Jews would have been saved. But still, there were people who tried to help. These helpers were in every country in occupied Europe. Some helpers acted out of political, ideological, or religious convictions. Others were simply human beings who cared about the people around them. In many cases, they never planned to become rescuers, and they were totally unprepared for the moment in which they had to make far-reaching decisions about other people's lives, as well as about their own, and in some cases, even about their families' lives. They too were ordinary human beings, and it is precisely their ordinariness, their humanity, that touches us and should serve as a model for us about how we should act in difficult times. Yad Vashem, the Israeli memorial in Jerusalem to the 6 million murdered Jews during the Holocaust, has identified and honored nearly 28,000 men, women, and yes, young people, teenagers, who helped Jews during the Holocaust. Yad Vashem and the Jewish people call them righteous Gentiles. They are the non-Jews who helped the Lamed Vav during the Holocaust. Who are these people who could not remain bystanders when others' lives were more endangered than their own? Who are these people who could not turn their backs on their neighbors, who could not say, hey, forget it, it's not my problem? Go to the Yad Vashem website, www.yadvashem.org, and read about some of them. You will see that they came from all walks of life. They were Christians, Muslims, and agnostics. There were men and women of all ages. There were young people, teenagers even. Some were highly educated. Others were illiterate peasants. Some were public figures, and others still people from society's margins. There were city dwellers from places like Paris and Rome and Vienna. There were farmers from the remotest corners of Europe. There were university professors, teachers, physicians, clergy, nuns, diplomats, simple workers, servants, resistance fighters, policemen, peasants, soldiers, fishermen, a zookeeper, a circus owner, and many others. Scholars have attempted to trace the characteristics these righteous Gentiles seem to share. They have tried to identify the kinds of people who were likely to extend help to the Jews and to other persecuted persons. Some claim that the righteous are a diverse group, and the only common denominator they have in common is their humanity and the courage they displayed by standing up for their moral principles. Sam and Pearl Oliner, two scholars from Humboldt State University in California, defined what they called the altruistic personality. Sam himself is a survivor of the Holocaust, so extremely interested in this topic. By comparing and contrasting rescuers and bystanders during the Holocaust, they pointed out that those who intervened were distinguished by characteristics such as empathy and a sense of connection to others. Professor Nahama Tek, a scholar and teacher from the University of Connecticut, Professor Tek herself also is a Holocaust survivor. She studied many cases of righteous Gentiles. She believes the rescuers' independence enabled them to act against accepted conventions and beliefs about Jews. There were different degrees of help. Some people gave food to Jews, thrusting an apple into their pocket, or leaving food where they would pass on their way to forced labor. Others directed Jews to people who could help them. Some sheltered Jews for one night and told them they would have to leave in the morning. Only a few assumed the entire responsibility for the Jews' survival. What we always want to know is why? Why did these people do it? Why did some people risk their lives to help Jews when so many others did not? Why did they step out of the shadows, so to speak, when so many others only wanted to stay in the shadows? Why did the righteous Gentiles act well when so many millions who might have helped did not? Perhaps the real question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the role of good people in difficult times? The great British historian Martin Gilbert argues that people who helped or who tried to help Jews during the Holocaust prove that evil need not go unchallenged. Every one of the acts of people who tried to help Jews during the Holocaust reveals that actions have consequences for oneself and for one's family if a helper is caught. And of course, such acts also have consequences for the Jew or Jews one is trying to help if he or she is caught. The Courage to Care is a short documentary film I had a hand in helping to produce. It tells a few stories about a few Jews who were helped by a few non-Jews during the Holocaust. It also tells the story of a few non-Jews who tried to help. I hope you will watch the film. It's 30 minutes long, and there's a link to it with my presentation. As you watch the film, keep in mind that the righteous are not angels or saints. Oskar Schindler wasn't an angel, but he was a good man who tried to help. The helpers you will see in The Courage to Care also are neither angels nor saints. They are ordinary human beings, good people. Just as it is a mistake to make the perpetrators, those who tried to kill the Jews, other than what they were, ordinary human beings, so it is a mistake to make the helpers more than what they are, ordinary human beings. We must not make either the perpetrators or the rescuers larger than life. Rather, we must keep them as what they were, life-size in a time when humanity was diminished. The Courage to Care is about people like Marion Pritchard. She was a Dutch university student in Nazi-occupied Holland. Irene Updike, she was a Polish young woman in Nazi-occupied Poland. Magda and Andre Trocmé, they were living in Le Chambon, France, during the German occupation of France. Magda was Italian and Andre was French, a Protestant Christian pastor of a small village. They were married with several young children. Why did they do what they did? While you were thinking about that, think about this too. What I would call the unfortunate human tendency to establish boundaries of moral obligation. What do I mean? In daily life, people act with care and concern toward their parents, their spouses, children, relatives, even certain dear friends. And they do so often at great personal sacrifice to themselves. But when it comes to strangers, to enemies, to members of different national, racial, ethnic, and religious groups, their boundary of obligation, their circle of concern often does not include such people. A stark continuum of choices is always offered to bystanders. They can add harm, prevent harm, or do nothing. Just remain neutral. Unfortunately, when power is unequal, doing nothing aids the powerful. Neutrality eased the task of the Nazi murderers. There was no such thing as harmless non-involvement. People like Marion Pritchard, Irene Updike, Magda and Andre Trocmé refused to allow Jews to be treated as outside the boundaries of moral obligation. Marion, Irene, Magda, and Andre, they were not angels or saints. They were just ordinary people, but they were helpers of the Lamed Vav, helpers of those hidden righteous on whose shoulders the world rests. As you watch the film, The Courage to Care, here are some questions to think about, then discuss. What are some of the reasons why people helped Jews during the Holocaust? Elie Wiesel says the victims died not only because of the killers, they died because of the indifference of the others. What did Elie Wiesel mean? How was indifference demonstrated toward Jews during the Holocaust? Give some examples. What influence do you think Pastor Andre Trocmé's preaching had on the population of Le Chambon? What constitutes courage? What does the title of the film, The Courage to Care, mean? What does Elie Wiesel mean when he says that those who helped Jews during the Holocaust remained human? And here's a suggestion for a follow-up activity after you view and discuss the film. Do it yourself if you're a parent, a teacher, or a student, or ask students to do this if you are a teacher or a parent. Go to the Yad Vashem website, www.yadvashem.org, and review the material that has been compiled about the number of cases of non-Jews who helped Jews during the Holocaust and have been honored by Yad Vashem. Select some of the stories and read them. Look at the online exhibitions about rescuers, about those who helped Jews during the Holocaust. Create something artistic, a poem, a painting, a sculpture, a musical composition, or something digital, a website, a podcast, or an ebook with images, honoring non-Jews who risked their lives during the Holocaust. I want to close by reminding you that focusing upon this small but significant chapter in the history of the Holocaust requires sensitivity and skill in order to maintain proper perspective. Each and every one of the people who helped Jews during the Holocaust is a reminder of what so many others could have done and of what so many others did not do. Ultimately, the Courage to Care makes clear that one person can make a difference, that one person counts. It also makes clear that to be human means to care. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, during the Holocaust, the Lamed Vav needed the help of non-Jews to aid the Jewish people in their time of need. The film, The Courage to Care, tells the story of a few of those non-Jews who tried to help.